point of going through this route, why not just take the same old, industrialization, you've got your machines, you do as things have always been done. But the reality is that we're actually entering into what we call smart economies. And smart economies, as part of the global environment, requires that we actually keep abreast to the global environment. And part of that is that if we're going to have smart economies, it basically means we need to start doing things in a smart way. And part of the smart industry environment is that we then need to have smart workers. Having smart workers, we just don't one day wake up and we have smart workers. It means we actually have to take a step back. It's in our education and training system. And the reason why that is so, if most of you do remember the myth of Y2K, where to some extent we were told, come the advent of Y2K, everything is going to shut down. It was this, I remember I was young, but it was this thing that I thought, when they said a virus, it was the advent of internet. And they thought virus, and I'm thinking this gargoyle thing, partly with biotechnical or metaphysical appearance, is actually going to go and infiltrate everything, and then your car will start moving, the banks will shut down, you lose your identity, and that. And it was taken as a myth. But to some extent, it actually got people to panic. And by panicking, what happened, some people actually went and stocked up because they expected that by the year 2000, shut down. So coming back now, smart economies, the advent of Industry 4.0. If you ask people today, is it really reality or a myth? My take that is that it's a slow reality. Slow because we're actually quite slow at adapting. But even if you go into European countries, how we adopt to improvements in technology. I mean, we're talking about fourth industrial revolution, but what does it really mean? The first industrial revolution was the 18th, 19th century, the water wheel and the steam engine. Second industrial revolution was the telephone, light bulbs, and and so forth. Basically mass production. And then you come into the third revolution, industrial revolution. It's actually when now you're talking about the Y2K issues, but it actually started back in 1982. Well, the 80s to be correct. And that was connectivity, the start of internet. That slow thing that you used to tap into and you can take forever. Then it was quite huge. But basically what it all means with Industry 4.0 is that we see a convergence of all these technological advancements. And what would it mean? You had internet, which was basically the connections of things. Today we talk about the Internet of Things. And sometimes the simplest way to explain it is think of your car, modern day car. In the olden days, everything used to be mechanized. So you'd have a dipstick that would basically measure your oil and petrol and everything else, and a light will come on. Today it's all computer-based. Every component in your car can talk to every other component. I'm talking about a smaller ecosystem. But if you think about it today in a bigger sphere, with the advent of 5G network, proximity, meaning you'd be able to upload information as basically devices are communicating with each other. But these are not devices in a homogeneous system like in a car as the simplest example, but the world talking to each other. So that's the Internet of Things. Come the second one, they're saying artificial intelligence. So this is a higher analytics configuration basically. Machines being able to analyze and give the kind of response of reasoning, well, not reasoning per se, lack of a better word, but supposing being able to analyze and giving you that feedback, which in the past we used to depend on people to be able to make that call. So the convergence of artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, virtual and augmented reality, which is where you can create non-real environments for you to participate. It's virtual, so it's not really real, but it is a reality. And then we're talking about mixed reality. So you can have virtual reality, and you can actually augment it into a physical space, hence mixed realities. So the convergence of all these things is what we then call Industry 4.0. There's quite a number of them going forward. But then in essence, the focus that I'm gonna dwell on is how we then use these technologies, and especially virtual and augmented reality, in the manufacturing sector. And to that effect, I want to play you a video. So most of this 5 years ago, well, actually going back to as early as the 1998, when I actually first came across this. So I used to be in the CSIR, I'm a product of the CSIR, going back to 1994. But back then when we were talking about 3D environments, it predominantly was in gaming. Little did we understand that the actual use of those 3D environments in manufacturing, in education, will actually have a huge impact on the bottom line. Because when we started talking 3D and everybody would go like, so what does that have to do with manufacturing or the production line? But the reality is that using that to actually improve your training or onboarding new content, onboarding large pieces of content to a number of people, cutting down the time that the people actually travel to points of operations to resolve smaller issues that could actually be done today. You link up with somebody, you've got a virtual environment, and you guide them through how to do something, and it's done. So just keep in mind, I'm going to show you basically 2 videos while I'm also talking through them. And what I want to actually be able to show is that 7 years ago, these were not just futuristic. Today, a lot of those elements are actually in practice. First in manufacturing or in multiple sectors, and then secondly, how we then step back to say how do we take that into training in our industrial sectors. So this particular video is called Smart Nations. It's a concept that's actually in practice in Singapore. And what you're looking at is basically the application of augmented and virtual reality in rescue services. So, your fireman's visors are basically also converted into screens. And for somebody sitting in an operations center somewhere, being able to guide it because you can superimpose the plan. In a fire, most of the time, visibility is poor and all that. But because of that virtual reality, they can actually navigate quite clearly. The second one is an example of how it's used in your property development sector before you can actually even spend a bit of money. Maybe it even goes back to prototyping. Before you even decide that, you can visualize what it would be like. The third one, in operations and maintenance, you've got multiple equipment, thousands and thousands of equipment. So if every time you have to maintain something, you have to go through a manual. Imagine for a big facility, like an oil and gas facility or anything like that. If you have to maintain something and then you basically have to go through a manual, and what this basically says is that you can actually create what you call a VR manual. Have all your component equipment visualized and input into what we call smart glasses. And as a person is doing maintenance, they're actually following those directions, or for lack of a better word, a checklist or a manual directing them what to do. The added bonus is that it actually has a camera overlay, so you also have quality assurance on top of it. This particular one is on health and medicine. It could be visualizing an MRI scanner, or it could be a 4D rendition of a baby pre-birth kind of a thing, which gives me the heebie-jeebies. But it's the reality. There is innumerable views with which we can learn, visualize what we need to do, and hence do things properly. So like I said, this particular concept, portions of it have been applied in Singapore. We've been involved in it in the aviation industry. And then second to that, is basically for you to be able to apply all of that, where do you need to start? How do you train and how do you educate? If you're gonna need smart workers, there's a paper on industrial skills published about 3 years ago, 2016, 15. And it basically says in the US, by 2030, an entry-level factory worker would basically need a master's degree. Let that sink in. A master's degree, entry-level. In terms of training and education, as a developing country, third world developing country, I mean, South Africa is regarded as the first world of Africa, first economy of South Africa. But if you look at our gap in terms of education, we still have a long way to go. 2030 is literally what? Less than 11 years away? An entry-level job would require a master's. And why are you thinking of that? Currently, in the US, there's about 2.3 million jobs that cannot be filled, not because there are not people there to fill them. It's just because the kind of skills required for those jobs are not available as an output from the education system. Are there jobs? Yes, there are jobs. Are we properly equipped to take them up? No. So then how do we reach that gap? And we're basically saying to have those smart workers, start using the same knowledge transfer technologies, appropriate technologies, to equip your learners to be available to take those jobs. I mean, if I use even as a case in point, just within the last, since commissioning 2017, I think, 2017, 14, as in production start. There's been plus minus 126 million spent on training, skilling and training alone. That's according to the fact sheets, 126 million. And by the way, 19 of that processes are new processes, manufacturing processes. So meaning if it was somebody who graduated in 2010, 2005, 2010, they're probably not properly skilled to take those up. Do you understand where the gap arises from there? We have an education system, but what we're producing for the best of the world. And in this case, that as a case in point, we might not necessarily have the right skills, which is why then industries end up self-training. In the automotive industry, apparently, we've got what? We've got a Ford plant, we've got BMW, we've got Nissan, Toyota, VW, Mercedes. Of those industries alone in Tshwane, if you get changed by Ford as an artisan, you cannot be hired by BMW because they regard you as not necessarily as non-skilled, but they do not recognize your training. They would rather than have to retrain you. So if you lose your job at Ford, retrenched, you go back into the unemployment line. For Ford to take you, for BMW to take you, for anybody else to take you, they would want to reskill you again. So think of the amount of money that we're spending. So why not standardize? It's artisan skills all throughout. It's the same in the aerospace manufacturing, which is quite price stringent. I mean, the same way with the automotive industry. Most of them use European standards, manufacturing standards. But you go back to TVETs or FET colleges, our teaching curricula and methods are not in line with Industry 4.0. So basically, those two videos were just to give you a taste of then how we can use some of this appropriate technology and VR and AR as a case in point. If we can basically create content that is relevant, and the biggest point in it is that we need to be able to allow people to deal with, interact with the content that they're being taught. So you have a single, if I say let's take a training academy in a manufacturing environment, and you probably have, 200 trainees to get through a year, and you've got 5 pieces of machinery each, or other production plant that's available, any component stage. For you to train all of them, you'd have to give them face time with the equipment, right? How many times or how much is the frequency that they need to interact with that? So if you basically have an engine block, cross-section whichever way you want, and all of them, how much time do they need to spend on that to basically garner the required knowledge and practice for you to be able to say, I'm sufficiently, convinced that they probably have 60% accuracy. Let's forget that. The complexity and the rate of change. So you've got an engine block today that was in for the past 3 years, and then it's upgraded, meaning you need to onboard new material. How long will it take you to actually have a newer engine block, cross-section the same way, for each person to have face time with it? So if you're using VR and AR, you can create content, whether it's your equipment, whether it's the same production line that you need them to engage with. And if they train on that, and you're also able to assess, they do say we learn by doing. Our picture, our mind is basically, a canvas to fill with pictures. My mentor, Mr. Dave Lockwood, whose shoes right now I'm trying to fill, is so passionate about education and training. And he would always say, when we read novels, yes, you read the words, but your mind creates a picture of the environment that you're dealing in. So take, for instance, in a training center, if you're reading a novel, it's quite easy. It's familiar words. But now put a text in front of people. We are in Africa. We're learning in a language that is foreign. We've got literacy issues. And then give somebody content that basically says, a sketchbook. I'll give a case in point. When I first did my civil engineering, I've got a background in civil engineering. My first drawing class coming from a non-technical education environment, meaning K-12 basic education, we were asked to draw a chassis. And when you read it from an African perspective, what is it written? Chassis. I'm like, what am I being asked to draw here? Everybody gets busy, and I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. What is a car chassis? And only to find that more than half the class also did not know what they needed to draw. Context. If you cannot create content that your supposedly smart workers and as smart learners can interact with and understand. So if you give me a book to read and you're saying a car chassis, yes, I will turn back and I will regurgitate that on paper and be able to pass. But that's only the theory. Come the technical side of it. If I don't understand the context of the information that I'm dealing with, I will not be able, once I become a worker, to be able to do that O&M properly in terms of operations. So creating content, virtual and augmented reality. Content on equipment and environments that you need to train on, that these workers are supposed to then go and work in, is the key. And that's just one element of the whole industry 4.0. And just with that, I would like to leave you with this last video that will basically show you what the current modern day use of virtual reality, not those, not the vision that was there in about 7 years ago, but what is currently happening, and in this case, with the use of augmented reality. And there goes my time.
Augmented reality.
It's called AR assisted, basically. And with that, Chair, I will leave this on. It can just be disconnected. Thank you.
Thank you.